So, the years that I feel I lost to my mental illness are something that if I think too much about, I can get pretty down about to this day. I'm not alone in the feeling that I lost years of my life due to my illness, my mental illness, schizoaffective disorder. And if we look at this from a literal perspective, I suppose, yes, people who are living with schizophrenia spectrum illnesses do literally lose years of their life due to shortened life expectancy from the illness. But I'm talking more about the years that I feel I've lost and that I know other people feel that they've lost due to not really being able to live life the way you want to and as fully as you want to, and being in and out of the hospital when you're trying to work toward getting a diagnosis and figuring out what's going on. And then, the readjustment of expectations about how your life goes. Making sense of that prolonged period of time in your life can be a painful and difficult thing. And when I look back on that period of life, sometimes I'm left with this feeling that I lost those years of my life to my mental illness. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing about what those years were like for me and what the process of coming to terms with those years has been like for me, in the hopes of maybe helping you to feel less alone if you experience these thoughts and feelings about a part of your life as well. So in my mind, I think I kind of put a time marker on the beginning of the years that I lost to my mental illness when I was in school, in university, and I really started to struggle with my mental health. There was a prolonged period of time of several years, actually, where I was seeing a therapist, a doctor, or a psychiatrist every single day. And it felt like my life kind of was centered around and was devoted to my mental illness. This period was basically spent trying to make sense of what was going on. It wasn't even focused on trying to live with the challenges I was experiencing and trying to move forward with them. It was really just spent trying to figure out what was going on and trying to make sense of the things that I was experiencing and the difficulties that they posed in my life. I was in a degree program that was supposed to be a year-long after-degree program, and this ended up stretching out to 3 years for me. And so that kind of feels like a sense of loss too, in terms of loss of productive time, loss of literal money in terms of spending more on a prolonged school time, loss of identity too, in terms of believing that I had the capacity to succeed in this realm, and then, in a way, failing at that. This period, I feel, is kind of marked by that sense of loss in lots of different realms of my life. And so that's a really difficult thing to move through, where you have a loss of self, a loss of identity, a loss of capacity, and just an overwhelming feeling of loss in life. That's a lot to deal with. And that's kind of led to my feeling of, well, I lost those years of my life to my mental illness. And all of this was going on in my mid-20s. And, to put this into perspective, comparing what my peers were going through and what I was seeing my peers go through on social media and whatnot, and just in my day-to-day interactions with them, this is a period of high productivity. You don't have kids, you don't have many responsibilities other than to yourself. And so you are finishing school, working on building a career, working on building more important relationships in your life. And it just kind of felt like I was being left behind in all of that. And I saw my peers and friends moving forward in terms of these life milestones and life trajectory. And it felt like I was being cut off from that trajectory that I had in my mind of what I was supposed to be doing as well. Much of these few years were kind of spent bouncing in and out of hospital, bouncing in and out of mental health appointments. And it didn't feel like I really had the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way with life and with life the way I wanted to. And I wasn't able to succeed in the way that I understood success to be. And now this continued after my education too. I finally graduated 3 years later, but then I was met with new challenges after school, and I ended up hospitalized for over a month shortly after I graduated. And that was when I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. Up to that point, it was kind of like I had lost a huge chunk of time to figuring out what was going on. And then I finally got the diagnosis. And then several more years after that were kind of, sometimes I feel like, lost to figuring out how to then readjust to what I now had to deal with for the rest of my life, essentially. When I was hospitalized this time, I had just before moved back to Alberta, which is where my family was from, to be closer to family and friend supports, because I had gone to school in a different province. That alone was hard for me to wrap my head around. I moved back in with my mom, and that felt like a tremendous failure in terms of regressing in my life trajectory and needing to fall back on that. I felt very, very lost for several years. And, I would try to get back into the workforce. I would try to, be a productive member of society, but it never really panned out. And it always kind of crumbled out of my grasp. And that was really, really hard to accept and to figure out how to move forward from. All of the ways that I had learned throughout my life to define success and to, goals to aspire to were all of a sudden no longer possible for me, or so it seemed. That was a huge sense of loss again. And it took a very, very long time. And, I'm still trying to figure out what it means to readjust goals and life purpose based on my realistic current capacities. And I think maybe the process of learning that is kind of where I cap off the years that I feel I lost my mental illness, because I think that was kind of a turning point. I realized that I could still lead a meaningful and successful life. I just had to kind of redefine for myself what exactly that entailed and what exactly that means. Now, that being my understanding, I still fall back every now and then. I went back to school to pursue a master's degree, and that crumbled in my hands too, because I don't think I was completely honest with myself about what my realistic capacities were. And I didn't take that into account, setting myself up for success in that instance. And so it's definitely an ongoing learning experience, learning how to reassess, reframe, redefine what it means to move through my life in a meaningful and successful way. I think another big part of why I would put a cap on the period of time that I lost there is that I started to focus on developing relationships more in my life. And I generated a renewed sense of purpose from being a good friend, being a good sister, engaging in society and engaging in life with the people in my life in meaningful ways, I think was instrumental in terms of redefining what it meant to lead a full and meaningful life. I met Rob around that time too, and learned more about what love and engaging in meaningful relationships was. He had 2 kids. I became a mother, and that really rounded out my life in a really beautiful way too. I think that focusing on the capacity that you have to engage with people and with things and, goals too around you is really, really important. Moving forward from my failure at going back to graduate school, I'm now going to try again in a different graduate program I've applied to for the fall. And I'm hoping that I'm not just trying to continually beat my head against the same wall with, trying to reach the same goals that I had before this all started. I hope that I have a more realistic framework to approach this from, and that I understand that I really do need to take into account my capacities and operate within those. We'll see. We'll see what comes of that. But I think an important thing to communicate here, what I'm trying to get at, is that it's okay and it's important actually to have goals still. Where the nuance comes in, I guess, is where these goals might need to change. Whether that's completely changing, when I started out on my journey through academia, I had this end goal vision of being a researcher and a professor, teaching university students about the research that I was doing around mental health and social work and all that stuff. And that was my passion. And that was really where I wanted to end up. And I still kind of hold those desires, of goals to work toward, but I'm kind of understanding that specific trajectory that I would have had to take to get there might not be within my capacities anymore. And that's okay. I'm kind of pivoting, and I guess, providing lectures to the internet now. I'm teaching the internet about my experiences with mental health and, kind of reworking what it means to contribute to society in a similar way of what I originally envisioned, but maybe just a little bit different and maybe tweaked more to respond to where I'm at in life. And the other thing to kind of touch on is that I think that I lost time in years of my life mourning the time I lost to my mental illness. And I think it's very easy to get stuck in that mindset of mourning and feeling sorry about the years that were difficult, and that it sometimes feels like you lost to your mental illness. And I think that it's important, and I really want to provide encouragement to try to reframe how you view that period of your life, and try to reframe it in the sense of, I learned a lot during that period. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I need in order to look after myself. I learned about how to advocate for myself going through the mental health care system. And, I'm a fuller person on the other side of that. And so, I lost more time to mourning that period. But I think it's really important to kind of recognize this and shift your mindset, because you don't want to keep losing time to this. You don't want to keep losing mental space and energy to feeling sad and down about things you've lost due to your mental illness. Reframing it more as a learning experience and equipping yourself with that learned experience moving forward in life, and still making goals and whatnot for yourself, but with that learned experience in mind. So if you can relate to this at all, and you feel that you have also lost a period of your life or years of your life to your mental illness, I just want to hopefully provide some comfort that you are not alone in that sentiment, and that it's okay if you didn't follow the same trajectory as people around you, your peers, your friends. That's okay. If you didn't follow the same linear trajectory that you had set out in your mind before all of this came about with your mental illness, that's okay. That's life. Life isn't supposed to go exactly as planned. And if we hold ourselves to that standard, we're kind of always going to be left disappointed. Having a little bit more malleability of thought and flexible thinking around what it means to move through life and what it means to learn and gain experiences while we're moving back and forth through life. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And also, if you want to help support us in creating these videos, please check out the link to our Patreon page in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.